So in this video, we're going to be going over two very important concepts when it comes to any of our Concept 2 machines. So whether that's the RowErg, the BikeErg, or the SkiErg. And that is our damper settings as well as drag factor. When you go into a commercial gym, very good chances are you are going to see this damper lever arm right here set all the way to a 10. That's just what most people do. They don't quite understand the purpose of this and how it relates to their fitness. When you go on the Concept 2 website, you're actually going to see them recommend setting this to anywhere between a 3 to a 5. When you look at the side of your Concept 2 machine, you're going to see the flywheel has these slots. Okay, so when we set our damper all the way to a 10, these slots are completely open. So what that means is we have more airflow that's going in and out of the machine, and there's more resistance against the flywheel. So it's going to be a heavier pull. A lot of times when we are trying to work more muscular endurance, this might be a good route to go. Somebody who is very big and very strong might be okay at a higher damper level. But most people, and when we think about the goal of most people when we put them on this machine, it's more for our cardiovascular fitness, okay? So for that, we actually want the damper a little bit lower. So if we were to go to the extremes and go all the way down to a 1, you're gonna see that these slots are almost completely cut off. So what that means is there's less air resistance in the flywheel, which means the stroke is gonna be a little bit easier, okay? So when we look at the adaptations we see, it's more going to be focused on our cardiovascular system, and the muscular system, although very active, isn't going to be the first thing that takes a beating. So now one reason why we don't necessarily want to always say, hey, I row at a setting of 7 or I row at a setting of 10 is because there's going to be a very different feel between two machines in two different locations if we're just using this system alone. Reason why is if you look at the filter inside of these machines, and if you look at this strip along here, what can happen over time is they can actually collect quite a bit of dust, and it's going to impact the way that air flows through the machine. So if you see a machine that's very poorly kept, it's very dirty, a level 10 is going to be quite a bit easier actually than a level 10 on a brand new machine. So in order to tailor it based on the adaptation we want, that's where the next piece comes in. That's where we're going to start to talk about drag factor. So all drag factor is just a numerical value that the machine places on the rate of deceleration of the flywheel. So if we have this all the way up to a 10, you're going to have more air in the machine that's pushing against the flywheel. So between every single stroke, that flywheel is going to decelerate a little bit quicker. The quicker that it decelerates, the higher your number. So if let's say I'm on a 7, for example, and I start to row, I can expect that this machine, because it is fairly new and it's quite well maintained, I'm gonna see a drag factor of about 160, okay? Whereas if I go and I find a rower in some garage that's kind of buried under 3 feet of dust, a drag factor of 160 you might not see until the machine's at a 10. So why does this matter? When we are remotely programming for people, we want to make sure that the stimulus that they receive is the stimulus that we intend. There are a few different situations where we might want a client to have a specific drag factor. So the first one, the one that'll probably be the most apparent, is when it comes to individuals who are either CrossFit athletes or Hyrox athlete. If you have somebody who is a CrossFit athlete or a Hyrox athlete, you're going to want to make sure that when they train, they're on specific drag factors. So when they get to the competition floor, they're not going to be super surprised by anything. It's not going to seem too heavy for them because the floor is a little bit different from what they have at home. So based on the division that they're going to be competing in Hyrox, for example, a women's division, you're going to want this damper at a 5. If you're a men's division or a female pro, you're going to be on a 6. Or if you are a men's pro division, you're going to be on a 7. So that's what Hyrox has said in their handbook. That's kind of the rules. That's section 8.5 that they're going to be talking about. Now, when you go to a Hyrox competition, chances are these are going to be brand new machines. So what we recommend is in our men's pro division, if that's what the client is competing in, we're going to want the damper roughly around 165. If we're in the men's division or the women's pro division, we're going to be roughly a 145. And then if we are in the women's division, we're going to be anywhere from a 130 to a 135 setting. So kids love hopping on the rower. And although a lot of it is about having fun with younger athletes, we want to make sure that we can start to instill some of the proper technique in this machine in those kids. Now, if we throw them on a level 10, you've probably seen it before, this machine is just going to manhandle them. It's just going to be, they're going to be all over the place. Sometimes they fall off the machine. So what we recommend is sitting between a 1 and a 3. Okay, so if you have a kid who's a little bit older, maybe like just getting into their teens, stick them at 3. If it's a younger kid, put them all the way down to a 1. Most of the time, adults are going to come in. There's going to be a wide variety of fitness levels with adults. So there's a little bit more play here. Usually, if we're talking about drag factor, for endurance type stuff, we want a drag factor between 115 and 140. So if you have like a big, powerful athlete, they might need to actually go to a lower drag factor just because they're not going to have quite as much muscle endurance. Whereas somebody who is a little more type 2 dominant, they might be on a little bit higher of a drag factor. So we usually recommend sticking with the factory recommendations from Concept 2 and putting them on a 3 to a 5 damper level. So now let's figure out how exactly we're going to communicate this with clients and how we're going to show them how to find their drag factor in their machine. So all you're going to do is you're going to go to your rower, okay? You're going to hit more options, the bottom button, and the very top button, display drag factor, okay? So all I have to do from here is I'm just gonna set up and I'm just gonna row. Go about 10 strokes and I can see my number. So on this, I'm about a 152 right now, okay? So all the client would need to do is they would adjust the lever arm. So for me, I actually need to go up a little bit because I'm shooting for a 160 right now. So I'm gonna set it to an 8, okay? I'm gonna start rowing again. Now I'm at a 172, okay? So I need to kind of play around with it, find my sweet spot, and then that's how you're gonna set that. Most clients, they're gonna have to set it once, and then it's good. If you're constantly going into a commercial gym, you might have to play around with it, especially if they have different versions of the Concept 2 rower or any of these machines. So that's it for this section of the training. I hope that you've learned something here. Let me know if you have any questions at all about any of this kind of stuff. Drag factor, damper levels, they can be a little confusing at times. Try not to let it get to you. Just do what's best with your client, listen to them, look for feedback as they go through. If they're having a tough time holding a pace, it might be the damper level was just too high, and always be willing to adjust things on the fly.